Baba, sioni mwanga mahali popote. Yesu, nimefinywa sana. Oh, nataka hii sasa na hofu ile haiji kesho. Baba, nipe uvumilivu, uvumilivu. Baba, nipe uvumilivu, 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 uvumilivu. Niweze kukungoja siku zangu zote. Hata giza kiwe siku 40. Baba, Yesu, nipe uvumilivu, uvumilivu, uvumilivu. Yesu, nipe uvumilivu, uvumilivu, uvumilivu. Uchungu wa moyo ulinifanya nione umbali nami. Ukweli ni kuwa uliposema hutaniacha kamwe, hivyo tu ndivyo unavyotenda. Na hulali pia waniwaza. Baba, nipe uvumilivu, uvumilivu. Baba, nipe uvumilivu, uvumilivu. Siku zangu zote nikungoje. Uvumilivu, uvumilivu, uvumilivu. Yesu, nitakungoja Yesu, nitakungoja, 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 ninakungoja Yesu, ninakungoja, 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 nitakungoja Yesu, nitakungoja, 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 ninakungoja Yesu, ninakungoja, ninakungoja, ninakungoja. Nitakungoja Yesu, nitakungoja, nitakungoja, nitakungoja. Baba, nitakungoja, oh Yesu, nitakungoja Yesu, nitakungoja, nitakungoja, nitakungoja.
and good afternoon, everyone. It's yet another Wednesday, and we are so glad to be with you to share this 1 hour exploring the whole issue of depression among teenagers. And I'm so glad that you are watching. We are coming to you live on YouTube and also on Facebook, I believe, from Mamlaka Hill Chapel, Ruaka. And with me to help us push this conversation forward is Margaret J here. Hello, Margaret.
Hello, Pastor Maggie.
Please greet us and tell us how you are.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm fine, and I'm blessed of the Lord.
Thank you so much. Welcome. And we have Jonathan. Jonathan, how are you today?
I'm very well. Good afternoon to you and to both of you. And I'm also glad to be here and looking forward to also share and to learn.
Excellent. Thank you. We are so glad that you're joining us here this afternoon. We continue to benefit from your wisdom, from your insightfulness, and we thank God for that. And for all our viewers, I want to pick it up from last week. Last week we looked at children, and depression among our children. And most of you were able to be responsive. You sent comments, you sent questions, and were able to interact along that topic. And today I want to invite you to do the same. Please let us know what you're thinking. Tell us how this information is impacting you so that we can move forward together. So without much ado, I want to ask Margaret, tell us, how is depression displayed among the teenagers?
Thank you very much, Pastor Maggie. Recapping from last week, even as we talk about adolescents, they are still children legally until the age of 18. So, and depression symptoms, they're those that cut across irrespective of the age, whether it's even among the elderly, 65 and above. We talked about depressed mood. We talked about loss of interest. We talked about, just feeling of being sad. And we said that these symptoms, especially depressed mood and loss of interest, it can be either of them or it can be one of them. And we said it needs to be present in the same 2-week period, most of the day, nearly every day. That means this person is manifesting either both of them or one of them for 2 weeks. And when you talk about most of the day, we said in the 24-hour day, then you're talking about most of the 24 hours in that, that day, they have a depressed mood or loss of interest. We talked about isolation. We talked about change in eating and sleeping patterns. We talked about loss of weight. We talked about suicidal ideation. So even adolescents will be manifesting those symptoms. However, one of the symptoms I would want us to really pay a lot of attention to when you're talking about adolescent is isolation and withdrawal. Adolescence stage, a characteristic of it is wanting to hang around their peers. Because if you remember from last conversation, what happens to them, they are more emotion-led. And everything that seems to guide how they see things, perceive things, and think and reason is a lot more from an emotional point of view. And that's why we find them, very, very interested and inclined towards to forming relationship and wanting to tend to draw away from their parents and to hang around their peers. So when you have an adolescent who, was very outgoing, loved the company of his peers, and all of a sudden they are withdrawn. And this withdrawal doesn't have a good justification or cause. And it's for a period of time. It's a telltale sign every parent should be aware of. There is a thin line when you're talking about adolescence and mood, because biologically, part of their development is there's a lot happening emotionally, physically. There is a lot of hormonal parts and everything else. So you can tell when you're looking at the mood, and you talk about the mood swings. It's common, it's normal, it's characteristic for an adolescent to have mood swings. But then note their swings. So their highs and their lows. But depressed is a continuous low. Yes.
Now, most people tend to associate mood swings with girls. Do boys also display the same level of instability in their moods?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
You know, you're talking about hormonal imbalance. You're talking about a lot of growth taking place and changes. So they also oscillate between the high and the low. And sometimes they can, you know, they have anger outbursts. But the departing point is when it goes beyond what is considered normal.
Normal. And every parent should be able to know
Yes.
what is normal among the teens or not. For you, Jonathan, as a parent of teens, have you been able to recognize these variations in mood among the boys?
Absolutely. I think the assumption that is that girls are moody. I've only got boys. I've got 3 boys. And the ones who are teens, they're turning 15 this month. And but they're probably watching this, so I'm also careful around how I'm saying this. But one of the things I think is, I mean, there are days you'd see them wake up and they look like they're on top of the world. They're vibrant. They're just chatty and everything. And then there are days when you're not even sure that to say hi or not, because they've got this face around them and this aura around them that now it just classifies them into teenage mood state. Let them go through that. Let them. Let's just wait for them to come out, so to speak. And that's a final response. I'll just wait for them to come out of it. And then from there now we can engage.
You can
but
pick
the
it up
moods
from
for
there.
sure are there.
They're there.
Yeah, they're there.
Fantastic.
It's actually characteristic. Yeah, it's normal, it's expected. And sometimes it's not, it doesn't have a cause to it. It's just what is happening internally. And for some, it's way beyond their control. So even as we bash them, let's just appreciate that when it comes to hormonal issues, you really don't have much
Control over that.
control over what is happening. Yeah.
So neither the parent has control, nor not even the teen themselves have control over that.
Yeah, and that's why life skills training is very important for the adolescent, even for them to just appreciate that when I'm oscillating, then I can regulate my emotions. I can take charge, you know, to a certain extent. I don't have to, you know, shout at people or throw things around. When they're in this state, they don't understand what is going on. So skills building also helps them just manage it in a slightly more effective way.
Sounds
maybe
like.
just to add to that also is they also do not recognize, in my view, that they're also switching between moods. So it's you who's external to it that can see that they have switched to a different mood. So they may not be, in a sense, conscious of the transition, which means, for example, then you need to be a bit more dynamic around the engagement as well, I guess, as you recognize it. Through them. Yeah.
You actually led my mind, because I was going to ask, we need to skill the teenager to understand the moods and everything, and the parent as well.
Yes. Right there.
Yeah,
Yes.
yes.
Right there.
Talk to us a little bit about the milestones that teenagers should be achieving, and what a parent should be concerned about if they see as like those milestones are being passed.
One of the things I also again want us to understand as parents, is that when it comes to development, we have physical, we have social, we have emotional, we have psychological, and we have spiritual. Development. I'm sure Pastor Maggie will tell us from the theories of faith development, there are those milestones that they go through. So there's all this that is happening and taking place, all of it at the same time. Like there isn't this that is delayed and on a post mode and the other one. And that's why adolescent is such a turbulent period, because all these things are happening at the same time. You're exposing them to education. The adolescents, they're getting into high school. There's the struggle of transitioning from childhood to adolescence and teen, you know, and there is the expectation of me, the parent, Jonathan, the parent, that you're not a child, and hey, they are still children, by the way. So there's so much that is going on. One of the things I would want us to also appreciate is the fact that when it comes to those milestones, the emotional part of the brain reaches and attains maturity in adolescence. Well, the executive functioning part of the brain does not reach maturity until the age of about 25. And for some later, 26, you know, depending on the early bloomers and late.
Just pause a little bit. I want you to say that slowly and in English.
Okay.
So that our parents can understand this and our teenagers also can understand this. So, because if the emotional is reaching maturity early, the executive is waiting way after teenagehood. How is this teenager going to function?
Okay. Let me go back, take one back.
Yes.
So, all the way from conception, the way the nervous system is structured, it is in 3 levels. So, you have the brainstem, you have the midbrain, or where you call it the limbic system, where the emotions are.
Yes.
Let's just call it the emotional brain for us to understand.
Yeah.
And then you have this part here, which is now where the executive functions reside. And this is the top brain. So in simple terms, you have the lower and the mid
Yes.
and the top.
The top.
And you know, the correct terms is the lower, the mid, and the frontal.
The frontal. I was
Yes,
afraid just of saying that word.
So
yeah.
what happens from conception? What develops first is the brainstem. This is where the sensory information, the limbs, the movement, and everything else, the digestive system. So this develops first, and then now you get the emotional part developing. That doesn't mean this is not developing, but in terms of acceleration, this travels very fast, and then this one, and then this one comes later,
Right.
in terms of attaining maturity. So what happens at adolescence, this is fully developed, the emotional part. So what drives them is what meets them at the emotional part, the
Right.
affect. And this is where the emotions of you need to be loved, wanted,
Affirmed.
happiness, sadness, they are all resident there. Now, when you talk about the executive functioning, we are talking about where high order tasks are processed, thinking, problem solving. You're talking about being rational. You're talking about decision making. And risk assessment is a high order
Function of the
functioning
brain.
part of the brain.
Okay.
So this is what parents need to understand. It is normal, it's natural for an adolescent to be operating at the emotional level. So when you tell your adolescent, use your head, we need to
Parents are notorious.
we need to ask ourselves, which head are we using?
Yes.
Right? Is it this one
Yeah.
or is it this one?
Yeah.
So they don't have the capacity to risk assessment as you and I, who are beyond for 25, where now the high order task functioning is taking place. And this explains why they will do things that you as an adult are thinking, it's completely ridiculous. What were you thinking? Remember, everything revolves around the peers. And also because adolescents, that's where social relations are also formed.
Right.
Remember, they are coming from the early childhood, then they get to this stage where they are not relating with the opposite sex. It's a boy-boy relationship, girl-girl relationship. But then in adolescent, they begin to form relationship with the opposite sex. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a milestone.
It's a milestone.
There's
right.
nothing wrong with that. It's just exercising the boundaries. So because they have a deep sense for being needed, because the emotional part of the brain is fully developed, that's what just seems to drive them. So they want their peers. And a child who comes now from an environment, remember we're talking about attachment styles. So these ones who come from a very disorganized attachment environment, has a very disorganized attachment style, because the family is dysfunctional, is very high in being needed. And remember, we said this is the one who is more at risk to depression because they are high on anxiety and they are also very low on attachment in forming relationships. So this child who has a very dysfunctional family environment would do anything to be accepted.
Okay. Now, we've touched on these developmental milestones, and it's very revealing that the child who is already needy is more likely to be disposed to depression. What other predisposing factors would there be?
So one is the environment, because in depression you talk about environment, you talk about the genetic predisposition, because a child who comes from a family where there's a history of mental illnesses, they are 3 times more at risk than any other child.
Yeah.
So the environment is where we are talking about the aspects of the nurturing, the dysfunctionality, where the child has a voice, where the child is, there's the environment communicates you're needed, there is no neglect. And most importantly, you're also talking about a child who is not struggling in terms of illness.
A healthy child.
A healthy child.
Right.
Because then medical conditions are also triggers to depression. A child who doesn't have the social network is also more vulnerable to depression than any other child. And of course, the early childhood adverse events like neglect, sexual abuse, or just exposure to any form of abuse, even the violence between the families, even a traumatic experience like a home was robbed or losses, through death, or even loss of relationships, by the way, when you talk about adolescence, because we've moved from this environment, those significant changes, they also are triggers to depression among adolescents. Yeah.
I think that's very well covered, and I feel like our parents are grasping the gravity of these issues, and I really appreciate that. We soon be taking a break. I think our time is moving very fast, but before we do that, should a parent be concerned when a child is sleeping?
Again, we come back from the point of, this is like the case of, is it an egg and a
chicken?
And a chick, yes, because change in sleeping pattern, either oversleeping or not sleeping, is a symptom of depression. And number 2, lack of sleep triggers depression. So when we talk about sleep for adolescents, they sleep. But the question is it too much? And it is left to the judgment of the caregiver who is with this adolescent to tell, is this within normal or is it out of the norm of what is expected? Because if you have a child going to bed at 9 and they sleep until 11 the following day, really, and they've been asleep, then that's something to be worried about. If a child, an adolescent, is not sleeping, like they will tell you, I don't sleep more than 3 hours in a night, and there is no just cause for that, then that's also something to be worried about. So because we cannot tell this number of hours, and then also with sleep, you also talk about the quality of sleep, because it's not just the number of hours you're in bed. It's also about the quality of sleep.
If the teenager is receiving.
Yes.
Wow. How about when the teenagers wear this face, that leave me alone?
The Jonathan, the one you were talking about.
Should you accept to leave them alone, or how much should a parent probe?
Can I first hear from Jonathan? What does that look like?
No, I think in terms of, the times they wear the face
That
that
face.
says,
Don't get near me.
Don't get
Just
near
leave
me,
me
I don't
alone,
hear you.
Yeah.
But I keep saying, that's fine, yeah? But still, it should not stop you from being able, first of all, to exercise your responsibilities. So, if, for example, if it's your turn to wash dishes, that face, you still go and wash dishes with it. If you need to be in class, like especially through this season of online class, you need to be in class, you need to be in class on time. So, yes, you wear the face, but still, in a sense, follow the instructions given or be able to exercise the responsibility that's supposed to be yours. Because I think I realized at some point is it's not necessarily giving them way to necessarily come out of their bad face or bad mood. It's still being able to say, okay, working with your bad mood, we still need to progress this day, for example, we need to progress a couple of things as a family unit, but not necessarily being able to victimize them or chide them for their face, as long as it's not disrespectful to their sibling or to their mother or to myself. You keep the face, but at least continue to do what needs to get done. That's how it is.
Should they keep the face?
Yes, and it's a balance between giving them their space, because also as adolescent they need their space, but also not allowing withdrawal from family. And that's a very tricky balance for anyone, even for any parent, to try and navigate through that. The same way as an adult, you need some space and a bit of privacy. Is the same way an adolescent needs that. So what does that, how are we decoding and what meaning are we giving to that face that we are talking about, and what is going on, you know, the context, the circumstance. So before we even pass a judgment like, I think that's just an attitude you're throwing with that face. We also need to try and inquire and find out what is happening. Because then again, remember, they're also so conflicted between being a child and what is going on, and sometimes it's totally out of control. And they're also struggling to demonstrate to the parents that, hey, I'm a grown-up, I'm responsible, and there are those inner struggles. So the thing here is, allow them a bit of space, but that space should not equal to withdrawal from the family, and should not be equal to what Jonathan is saying. Like, you, so when we see you like that, we don't
give
let
you
you do
details.
the
Don't
dishes
engage you.
on that kind of a thing. Yeah, it's just that trying to balance between that. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I think we're going to take a break now. And when we come back, we look at how to manage the issues of depression among our teens. And at this time, I could invite more questions to come at this time, so that as soon as we come back, we can address those questions. Thank you.
Twakusifu, twakusifu, twakusifu Mungu mwenye nguvu.
Lord. We go. Milele, twakusifu Yahweh. Hallelujah. Mwokozi. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Yesu asifiwe.
Amen.
Hallelujah. Yesu asifiwe. Kila mtu sema malo malo.
Asifiwe.
Kila mtu sema malo malo. Let's go. Hallelujah. Yesu asifiwe.
Amen.
Hallelujah. Yesu asifiwe. Kila mtu sema malo malo.
Asifiwe.
Kila mtu sema malo malo. Let's go. Let's lift up the Lord. We go.
Welcome back. We are here for you guys. We are waiting for you to keep talking to us and to keep tuned, and we are so glad you are watching. A few shout-outs to Jackie Oduo, Locked In, Ami Mwende, Esther, Essie, Bethu, Sonia Essie, Amanda McKenna, Buru Masike, hi guys, James Ishoki, Loza Gibbs, Sala Dabi, Monica Deuri, Angela Wajiko. All you guys are tuned in, and we are so glad that you're locked in. Angela, I've mentioned you. Pascal Olude, Helen Achina, Jennifer Kimanzi Nyaka. Karibuni sana. We are so glad that we can share this hour together and the lessons that are so amazing. So to get right back in, we want to explore ways of managing depression among teenagers. So let's pick it up from there. What are some of the things that parents could do to help manage the situation among their teens?
The first thing, and the rule of the thumb for the parents in terms of one, preventing, and two, managing, is one, you need to know your adolescent. Because then the symptoms that we are talking about are not exactly so obvious for anyone who is not keen and who is not paying attention. So I need to know that look. What does that look mean? I need to know, and to have paid attention that there's a change in eating patterns, because last night when we sat around the dinner table, you didn't eat, or the portions, or you're eating too much, I can only pick that, because remember, it's their behaviors, they're observable, and sometimes the individual is not fully aware. So the people around them are the ones who are likely to pick that. So you can pick that if you really are very close with this adolescent, if you know them, if you can tell, like Jonathan says, the way I see you right now, let me give you a bit of 1 hour of your free, time to be alone. I know you will come around. So then you'll tell when that has gone on for most of the day, you can pick that. But for a parent who is not keen, they will not pick that. By the time they are picking the symptoms, chances are that the adolescent has moved from mild to moderate. They are at severe, which now in terms of treating takes a bit longer and it's more intense. So that is number one. So observable general change in behavior is number one. You need to see that. Number two, when you notice that there is something, as a parent, you need to be every parent needs to be the go-to person in their child's life. That before I go to Jonathan, I go to Pastor Maggie, I go to someone else, I need to go to mom and I need to go to dad. Because I trust in their capacity to help me.
In the
and to
ideal
validate
situation?
in the ideal situation. Yes.
But if the situation is not ideal, there could be another possible go-to person?
Yes, there could be a go-to person.
Yeah.
And that is why it's also very important for us as parents to know who do our children hang around. And these friends, what do they offer my child? Because every relationship, even for us as adults, it meets a need.
Yes.
So what needs are their
being met.
friends meeting?
Uh-huh.
Because they went to them, because there is something they're getting from that relationship. So when I know who my son is hanging around, and then it's easy even to get information from them. And they would also be willing to come and give me information. And that's why before you bash their friends, get to know who they are. Because it's not all of them who are very bad. So when you notice these symptoms, number 2, please seek help. There is a place for medicine and there is a place for counseling, psychotherapy. And medicine and psychotherapy go together. Because like we said, mental health disorders, they have triggers. So what the doctors, psychiatrists treat is to reduce the symptom severity, not the root cause.
Yes.
So that's where psychotherapy or counseling comes in. Unless you address that, you will keep having the relapses and, they'll keep going back and out and, and all that. And then in management, there's the place for skills training. Remember, even though we said they're emotion-led, that doesn't mean they don't have the capacity. There's nothing in terms of their cognitive. There's a lot. They're in school, they are learning, they are taking abstracts, they're getting A grades, and all that. There is that. So we need to give them the right skills to navigate the adolescent stage. So if it is skill like, assertiveness, so if your friends are saying, let's go out, let's do this, let's try experiment on drugs, then you teach them to know that even though you really want to be needed, it is okay for you to say no. So one of the other way of managing is just teaching and giving them the right skills. Yes.
Wow, that is very good. And I'm going to take you back a little because you used the word grades, yeah? Parents are always looking, Jonathan, for good performance. I think we all have looked for good performance from our children. We want the A grade. And when the child produces an A grade, is it a good sign all the time, or could there be a problem or a low grade? Is there a concern or an issue with the grades?
I'm laughing because as parents, as long as you bring me an A, I am good to go.
Child is fine.
And my child is
Must
fine.
be fine.
Now, sadly, the children who are very delinquent, they're just difficult, and they will do anything because they know my parents don't look beyond
The grade. Just challenge parents right now.
Yes.
With the grade issue.
The children you will meet and they'll be like, I know my parents just want to see a good grade. So anything can pass as long as I bring them a good grade. And sadly, even in schools, there are children who are going to be such difficult children in school, but they are top in class. So the school will just give them, light discipline, like suspend them for a week or something like that and come back. Because not necessarily because you don't have a problem with this child, but because when the KCSE or whatever comes, they are going to push it, the mean score up. And children know. But the children really know you. They know what you want and they know what you want to hear. So for me, it's not just the A grade. It's holistic. Everything about this child. When a grade drops, it's a telltale sign there is something that is going on. But an A shouldn't blind us that everything else is okay. Because the A could be the barrier or the curtain. And behind the scene, there's something else going on. So just don't look at one aspect. We're talking about the total holistic development of the child.
This child.
Yes.
Wonderful. I think let's...
I don't know whether Kinder Jonathan as parents, if they
I was going to ask Jonathan. You smile at an A.
Yeah.
What else do you pay attention to? as a parent?
I think you delight at the A because the A is the result of an outcome, but it's also the result of a process as well. So actually, I have it in having told the boys that if you come out of they're currently in high school, part of a high school, and you've achieved your A, yeah, but you have not been able to develop a talent that you had. You've been able to be able to get involved in activity that allows you to give back to society. Then the A is not enough. There's a place for you to be able to say, I left the school with a B, but I was able to connect very well with this particular initiative by the school that was helping this particular group, or I've discovered myself in terms of playing badminton, for example. For me, that becomes more holistic because I know now for mind and body and socialization, they have been able to grow together. Because I think part of the process of being able to raise or maintain the expectation of an A is that if they don't then deliver it, then it becomes a trigger for them to get into the states that we're talking about. I think one of the things as well around being able to identify what your child is going through, in addition to the observable, is, and that has worked very well for us, is just being surrounded by, we have surrounded by 3 families that we started off as couples, and we are children, and the children are all teenagers. Because sometimes as a parent, because of work or other things, you may miss it. But then now in the socialization together, your friend asks you, is there something wrong with your son? He looks different. Because again, they can also be able to help you because you're, in a sense, actually, we've agreed we're co-parenting.
Right.
And we've told our kids, but if you can't talk to me about something, go and talk to, that particular family, go and talk to that particular family. If you feel that I'll not be objective enough to listen to you, and they'll come and be able to address it. So then that becomes an additional outlet for them to be able to trust that, okay, if I can't get recourse at home, the next level of recourse is in a circle of friends and family that I'm very familiar with. Now, one of the other things I think that also you can't observe, but is being able to hear. To listen. And we often, actually, we drop our kids to school in the morning. Sometimes we pick them, sometimes they walk or cycle back home. But there is also the conversation in the car that allows you to hear what it is they may be saying or not saying. There is the review of the day that allows them to say what they're going through. There is their reaction to something they see or something that they read that tells you about their state of mind. And then you praying for wisdom and saying, okay, how do we be able to tackle that? But I think in the entire part about being able to support your child, the relationship that allows them to be comfortable to even begin a conversation. And for you to be able to have the wisdom to be able to not react. Because I guess if I tell you, for example, I'm going through this, and the first thing you say, but they be a man. I've closed that avenue totally. I'm not going to be able to bring a problem to you at all. Just owing to how you reacted. So there are times I've caught my tongue to be able to defer the response for later. Or even when you see behavior is a bit erratic, you defer the response for later because also you don't want to say, that's very stupid of you.
Yes.
But it's not. They're not stupid. It's a behavior that you're trying to castigate, to address. But sometimes you don't catch your tongue. They're going to leave that conversation with the thought that Dad thinks I'm stupid.
Yes.
And that, again, allows them to start thinking a bit, having low self-esteem on themselves. You never know, again, what that else could be able to lead to. Yeah.
In an earlier conversation, Jonathan, you talked about your dad, and that stayed with me. You narrated a situation when you bashed your dad's car.
My first accident, yes.
Yes, your first accident.
Yeah.
And your reaction, your dad's reaction, he was slightly bigger, but your dad's reaction is what stood with me.
Yes.
Because it pointed me to the need of an enduring relationship between a father and a son.
Correct.
So how have you been able to build
Yeah.
a good relationship with your son? And as a Christian parent, are there things that you could talk to other parents about that enabled you to begin a good relationship and it's able to sustain up to to this time.
Okay. So yeah, I think in terms of building an enduring relationship with your son, I think part of it is, and I guess as you say, parent each child for who they are, and almost each gender for. I find for boys, activities do it. Let's do something together. Then in the activities you build memories together. In the activities you have conversations together. In the activities you're able then to be able to be comfortable around each other, that you can then be able to instruct. So whether it is cycling for us, whether it is swimming, whether it is camping, whether it is driving, and now they're a bit tired of my driving. I've literally driven them to the end of Africa. In that, you find that you're able to engage your children. That's Proverbs 1:8-9.
Right.
It says, "Sons, listen to the instructions of your father, and to the teaching of your mother," which then which speaks about a proactive father who's instructing continuously their child, and also a mother who is continuously teaching. So there's a place now back to the example of my first accident. Because of the ability to have a relationship with my dad, I told him I was going for a party. And I said, okay, no problem, use the car. I just actually turned 18, I could drive, use the car. But then he had told me the car had a problem. So in the evening at night when I was trying to get back home, there was a hill I couldn't quite navigate, so I got some speed, and in the process hit a pole. But then my dad had always told me, if you have an accident, take that spare wheel out and take the battery out if you're going to leave the car there. And that's what I did. So when I arrived home with a battery and a spare wheel, so like, okay, something must have happened to the car. He told me exactly what happened, and he said, okay, that's a power issue. So in the morning when I woke up ready to go and go get the car, he told me, no, you go to school, I'll get the car. But he was unhappy, his car had been bashed, but at least, now based on the instruction given, you at least followed what had happened. And also based on the relationship, I'm not still in the car.
So,
Yeah.
if you're not present, if you're not proactive, you'll not be able to instruct your son.
Yes.
And then, these relationships allows you, as a father, to equip your child.
Exactly.
So that he knows exactly what to do when he gets into a situation.
Correct.
Isn't that
Correct. Yeah.
amazing?
And two of them love swimming. And again, when you parents to each individual, there's a point one was very self-aware about the fact that they were never gonna win that particular event. Yeah. And you realize, okay, this they have told themselves this, but all we are saying, the result you see is he's number 3, number 4 when it comes to swimming. Yeah. That's the result you're seeing. But now, why are they doing it? Is a conversation that can only bring that out.
Yes.
When they tell you, I can never beat so and so. Yeah. And then we went into a little regime about how to improve their fitness. And when they eventually beat them, they were happy for themselves, but they were able to be cognizant of what it took to be able to overcome themselves.
To make that shift.
Yeah. But then the fact that you've established a place to be able to talk, you trust that now in later days, they'll be able to tell you, okay, this is what I'm going through. Are you able to counsel me or whatever? Help me through this. Or just be with me as I walk through this.
Right.
Yeah.
Walk with your child through a situation, especially a teenager. And I think our parents have caught that instruction that if you don't build memories together, then it is impossible to be able to speak or to instruct effectively your child, isn't it? Yeah? So let's come to you, Margaret, and we are realizing that we are preventing and we can also be able to treat. But traumatic experiences that children have had, and they have come into teenagehood and they carry that baggage with them. The parents were never able to catch it, and then here they are, the child is depressed. Where do they go?
The starting point, and I love what, allow me to just go back to something Jonathan said that I thought was really good, that their children know if we can't get recourse at home, we can go to this uncle, this auntie, or this family. Now, that is only for a family that is high functioning, because then a family that is not high functioning will look at that as you're going to expose our weaknesses, like washing our dirty linen, so would rather have the shame that bind us together. So then the children don't even know who they can go to. So in the case of a child who has an adverse or traumatic childhood experience, like you rightly put it, if it is not addressed, it follows them. It's a scar. And we said last week, children are like wet cement. Whatever touches them leaves a permanent imprint that they carry with them. So their behavior is to a large extent explained by the trauma that they went through. Now, it would be a sad case, especially if the parent is not aware that the child has had a traumatic experience. Because they will just be seeing reaction through observable behavior that the parent does not even understand. And then the question here is, why didn't my child come to tell me that they went through something traumatic? Is it because they already knew I'm not going to be of help? Or maybe because I was going to bash them? Or is it because the child interpreted whatever they went through as shameful? Or did they blame themselves, so they are carrying some level of guilt and that kind of a thing? So it's important to first and foremost investigate what happened. Why didn't they tell you if they didn't? But for any child who has gone through a traumatic experience, the first call of point is, can they seek therapy? Because then this trauma, if it is not addressed, is what now later becomes the post-traumatic stress disorder. And then they live with it, and then they are constantly struggling. It's something constantly struggling to be resolved. And because there is the need, desperate need to be resolved, then it influences our motivation indirectly, and therefore our behavior. And this, again, trauma could also be a trigger to depression. Yes.
Wow, that's actually very important. I wondered whether when a child is depressed, apart from, post-traumatic experiences, they had had a difficult childhood and everything else, could there be other factors that are related to this depressive state of children?
And especially when we talk about adolescent, there is bullying, and it's real. And, now, sadly, right now, we are in a COVID season where before we told the children, don't use your screen.
Yes.
Your phone, your laptop, and everything else, and your tablet. Now, today, we are telling them to use it.
Yes.
For school and for class. So what we don't know, there's a lot of undertone going on in terms of bullying because they have access. Because then, as a mother, maybe I'm not monitoring everything that my child is doing with my laptop in the guise of they're in school and they're doing online.
Right.
Studying and all that. So bullying is one of the risk factors towards adolescents' depression. Number 2, drugs and substance. Now, remember this adolescent, they're oscillating mood. And maybe they're in an environment where the parents don't seem to understand and appreciate, in an environment that is highly disorganized. So one of the reasons that adolescents resort to drugs is for sense of acceptance. Because there's a way in the drug circles, we don't care. There's no class, there's nothing, there's no where you come from. I mean, we are buddies, we are equal. So there's a lot of acceptance in that context. So again, when a child is in drugs, we also want to question, what is it that this company is doing for him? Remember, we said every relationship meets a need.
Yes.
So what is this company doing for this young man? Number 2, drugs for adolescents, other than just being experimenting, just trying to see and that kind of a thing, it could also be they're using it to numb some emotional pain or some psychological pain. So in the event of, for example, like sexual abuse, they don't want to talk about it because it's considered shameful. So this thing is so real in them, and it bothers them, and they don't know how to deal with it, and they don't have the access to a psychologist or someone else that they can talk to about it. So how do they numb that? Either self-harm Or number 2, they take drugs because drugs will give them some temporary relief. So again, when you have an adolescent who is in drugs, it's very important to also try and find out what do drugs do for you.
Yes.
And the same thing with getting into gangs. What is it that this guy is in this gang? What need is this company or this group that is meeting for you? And because they are so needy, very high on social attachment, that most often than not is the need that is driving them at an unconscious level sometimes to get into the situations that they find themselves in. Yeah.
Wow, thank you so much. You guys, you have been a blessing. And I can see that our time has actually gone, as in very gone. So I want to wind up this session, and I want to invite you, Jonathan, to start us off by giving a parting shot to a parent. Encourage a parent who has not engaged the place of spiritual nurture or discipleship of the children as one way of keeping the kids safe. It's also a way of staying engaged with your children. Please.
Okay. So I think the first thing to probably mention is that as a parent, it's if you're an empty vessel, it's very hard to point to your child values or instructions that are not that you don't have within yourself. And the place to be able to feed yourself up is the scripture. So if you're able to feed yourself with scripture then gives you the wisdom to be able to parent. Because parenting is not an easy journey. So it gives the wisdom to be able to parent. And then in so doing also, be able to train your child, to instruct your child on also how to be able to fill their own cup, to fill themselves up with scripture. So one of the things we do is also being able to read the Bible together, being able to hear interpretation of the Bible together. One of the things we're going through Judges now, and we're learning about the place of leadership and being proactive in leadership. But that's not just it. What about the people who follow leaders? Yeah, they need to be willing followers. But again, it's very hard to instruct that. Or just tell you need to be listen to your prefect. But the Bible gives us a place to be able to have that discussion and also be able to capture their thoughts around the same thing. So I think the ability to be able to study God's word together becomes a foundation stone also for them to be able to affirm their value before the eyes of God. Yeah, they are valuable. Each child is precious in the sight of their Creator, who is our Heavenly Father. So even when they don't find that coming through you, when you're not affirming their value to them, but if you're able to then instruct them through the Word of God and able to search that themselves, then they're able to find their value through God who created them. And of course, it becomes a blessing that we all pray for if they can give their lives to Christ. So that's that first place of being able to affirm them through the love of Christ as a parent. And then, of course, being able to affirm them as a parent yourself can only come through you being ingrained in Scripture as well. Yeah.
Fantastic. And then we have the parent who does not have Christ yet. They don't have this foundational strength that they can allow their children to benefit from. From you, Margaret, from a psychological point of view, how can we help a parent to either protect their children or help manage the situation of depression if that situation obtains?
I'll start with the point of number one, we are the screen that our children watch. So they respond to situations from the way they see us respond to situations. So when we are in a conflict or in a dilemma, how do we deal with it? And remember, as parents, we are very influential and significant persons or authorities in the life of our children. So it's very important that we come from the point of getting to resolve things in a very amicable and a very constructive way, because children are learning from us. Number two, when it comes to issues of mental health, there's nothing. Depression shouldn't be stigmatized. The people who stigmatize mental health issues is because they come from a point of ignorance. Even the Bible reminds us lack of knowledge
Yeah.
So if you don't have any knowledge, then you're not wise.
Yes.
And when you don't have any information about what is going on, then you don't know how to deal with it and how to, how to resolve or how to try and respond to it. So when I see my child is depressed, the first thing is there's nothing wrong with my child. Validate that child. Just know there are certain things that are not working. Not about the child, but about the environment. And so I need to fix the environment. I need to find out what is happening in that environment. And then number two, I need parents to understand them. They're brave, they're courageous, they're real, they're honest when they realize there's a problem and they seek help. And we are not weak as a family, and we don't have a problem as a family when we go to seek help. If anything, we are the strongest because we realize what is going on. And then number three, and final, I want to tell parents, take time. Just get to parent each child individually. Take time, understand. So between my two children, I need to know Njeri and I need to know Moshiri and parent them uniquely and individually and not the same because they're totally different. And what I do with them now will have an impact because their personality is being formed. And what happens right now is going to be replayed later in life. And I tell parents, there's no perfect parent. We are all in the process of becoming.
And there's no manual.
There's no manual.
No one has a manual.
And no one scores an A.
No one scores an A.
Yes.
We all try.
We are all in the process of being good parents.
Yes.
Yes.
Being transformed from glory to glory, aren't we? Thank you so much. We cannot thank you enough. Jonathan, thank you so much for your time and for your insightfulness. We really appreciate that. Margaret, thank you for your availability. We know how busy both of you are, and yet to make time to come so that we can have this conversation and speak to somebody who would otherwise not have had this knowledge that is priceless. Parents, thank you. There we have it. Let's equip ourselves on skills that we don't have. Let's ask questions. Let's accept. Let's not deny. Let's acknowledge there's a problem, because when a problem has been accepted, it's how it's solved. Then there's always help available. And there's no one good time to start. Your time to start is the best time for you to start. So if you have a problem, you know where to go. Mamlaka Youth Chapel is open 24/7. Call us, let us know if you have a need to see a psychologist or a psychiatrist. Whatever your need is, we are always here for you. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week on Wednesday. And we thank you once again for staying tuned. God bless you.